at the arcade, so that's when I played the most of it. And then, yeah. Anyway, so WCS, how about them Terran, right?
Yeah, I don't. It's kind of interesting.
Uh,
Just all of a sudden started like winning everything last couple of months, I guess.
yeah, and and
Months.
that's been a big point of jokes and a lot of other commentary. But what do you think is the? We've hashed the balance out every episode, really. What do you think it is? That's because what Widowmine changes and Hellbat changes were our two big things this year in maps.
Uh, I don't feel like the Hellbat change is making a huge difference, though. Let me
I
think. Are the Terrans? I guess some of the Terrans are using Hellbats in TVZ.
yeah, I mean like I think I see Daishi. I can't think of a whole lot of others who go like to Hellbats right off the bat. Like they're definitely in mech, obviously, but I mean there's also arguments about the Widowmine, man. I don't know, like I just kind of feel like a lot of like the best Terran players were always good, even when like there weren't these buffs. So I kind of feel like people get really obsessed over Terran being OP, but it's more like, Tasia and Bomber and such being OP. It's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't. It's really hard to talk about balance. Like, what strategies did they do that were like OP? And it's just, it's the same thing when Protoss was doing really well, when Zerg was doing really well. It was like, well, was Six Gate Blink like OP, or was it because, we saw it in a tournament and it crushed every Terran because like they had never played against it before? Like, uh, and then as time went on, the Terrans started doing a lot better against it. Like, it's really hard to gauge a strategy. The first or second or even the third time you see it, you have to play against it a bunch of times, and then once you figure out what it is you need to do against that strategy, it still takes time before you can do that fast enough and effectively enough in the game. And then being able to read the signs, like knowing that six gate blink wasn't all in, was difficult at first because you had like no idea what the signs were. And then as time went on, it was like, well, they're not making any sentries early on. They're not taking the gases at their natural. They're cutting probes at a certain point. So like there were all these different ways that you could look for the fact that they might be doing this build. And of course, it started getting better and better. And then there were all the nerfs, and it just kind of went away. And the maps too. The maps are making pretty big
No
difference, I
Polar
think.
Knight is pretty cool. No Blink all ins to like auto win. That's a nice
Well,
thing.
yeah, it was Polar Night, Heavy Rain, Dallas Point. Those maps were all just
I
like,
think Well, I think to kind of build off what you're saying though, a lot of it is just people got better at the game. Like it's not even just Terrans in general. Like I mean, you could look at each race subjectively, but I guess we're talking about Terrans because of recent results. But I mean, I, the only change I've seen out of all these recent patches is like the Thor affecting Mutalisk has been the only thing that's been discernibly, I would say, OP. Because I mean that changed the TVZ matchup quite a bit. But like one of mine's got better. Okay, they were still being used same and less amounts by the same players who were using them before. Same with the Hellbats. So I mean like I don't know. I kind of feel like what you're saying is like nail on the head when it comes to like players just start figuring stuff out. People started learning the game better, practicing more. I don't know. Just the skill ceiling seems to have been raised, and I don't know if that just kind of brought Terran up with it or what the case may be. But I
I mean, I always look at the ebb and sway of tournament results. They have more to do with one or two or three or four players at the top of the race than it has to do with anything else.
yeah,
It's like
exactly.
when Stefano was really good in winning everything, Zerg felt like the most broken piece of shit that anyone had ever played against. Because every single Zerg was copying how Stefano played, and he was really, really good. And it was like, well, is Zerg OP or is just Stefano really good? Um, and the one thing here is it's kind of strange because Tasia was winning a lot, but nobody else seemed to like do very much. So I don't know exactly what the deal with that is, but
That's
it definitely feels like if one player figures something out that's really really good and they do it in very high profile matches, the whole race gets brought up.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of what I was saying earlier too. Where I just think it's like it's less about like one race being OP. Like you look at Tasia and Bomber, like those are like the go-to badasses recently, Pulse and such. I mean, Polt doesn't even do anything crazy a lot of the time either. You don't see him abusing Widow Mines. You don't see him really doing something different with Hellbats. He plays the same standard way like every time. So it's again, I really think it comes down to the players more than the race.
I think it's really funny that all of a sudden Terran started doing well and Tasia fell off.
Yeah, I know the irony of that, right?
It's like Tasia's only good when all the other Terrans are bad.
He's good at fighting adversity. That's what it is.
Yeah. He's like, oh, looks like I'm the only Terran in the round of 16. Better win again. And then all of a sudden he's like, oh man, I got to play some Protosses, and there's like, 6 Terrans are going to be in the round of 16 with me. Like, I think I'm just going to lose. That seems good.
I think that Tasia was doing very well in compared to other Terrans, especially earlier in the year. And I think that kind of to your point of Stefano doing X and then Zerg started doing, X. Do you think that the build of Terran allows for that for a build to be copied and pasted and be as successful?
I definitely think so. 4GG is a good example of this. No one else really uses Hellions like he does. But like with the results he's been getting with them lately, I mean, even this morning, we had a show match and he went like 45 Hellions versus Hearthstone in a PvT. Like, you do that in like the finals of a tournament, you're gonna see everyone on ladder doing that. You're gonna see other pros emulating it. I mean, it's I feel like it's almost flavor of the month, not through like any buffs or anything, but just like what's cool, what worked really well, what's easy to emulate.
Yeah.
Like the Banshee drop.
Banshee drop.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, you picked up Banshee up in the medevac and
the Raven. The Raven.
Classic build. Build.
The Raven tank drop.
Oh yeah, in TVT.
Yeah,
that build is super strong, and it's really easy to do. You don't have to scout. You don't really have to attack at all. You just like go gas first, make a Raven, defend, and then when you have 2 medevacs and 2 tanks and your Marines, you just like go and pick somewhere in the Terran's base and unload everything, and the game ends.
Yeah, it's pretty cut and dry right there. So, I guess out of all of that, Terran, I don't think has received a big change. As far as, yes, the Hellbats do give a lot of early game option for TVZ. The Widow Mines are, very effective against Templar openers, but I think the map.
That's a good. Hang on, that's a good thing to bring up though. Actually, Widow Mines versus like the whole charge lot storm thing. That was like the strongest thing to do, and I don't know who was like the first person to be like, all right, Widow Mines are a good way to counter this. But like once that got figured out, that's what started changing the game around, and this was before they got buffed in the slightest. So I mean, that kind of comes down to again where like one cool thing happens, everyone clicks on like, oh, this works, and that's the whole metagame shifting once again.
Yeah, and I think you also bring up a good point that you can't just consider like, well, what do the games look like now, and then you're like, oh, well, none of the buffs are in place, so like it's not really changed that much, because the Widowmine being buffed plus what Riff was saying, and that Terrans realize that Widowmines are really good against the Templar, made it so that every single TVP is basically a Colossus tech.
Yeah,
and you're like, oh, like you don't even see Widow Mines in this matchup, and it's like, well, yeah.